Welcome to Prime. I'm Fundo Mabalani. Leading our bulletin, high drama was seen at the last sitting of the Parliamentary Eskom inquiry for the year. Probably the only main stakeholder not invited for the hearing so far, businessman Ajay Gupta chose to write to the committee. The chair read out 2 letters from his attorneys to the committee. Ajay Gupta says his family has not been given a chance to be heard so far, even as allegations continue to be levelled against them. He also produced evidence to show that Eskom suspended legal head Suzanne Daniels' allegations of a meeting with him were false. Daniels claimed that she met with Ben Martins, Ajay Gupta, Salim Essa and Duduzane Zuma in a flat near Melrose Arch on the 29th of July of 2017.
I annex a photocopy of the passport of Mr. Ajay Gupta, a copy of the relevant immigration stamped page from Mr. Ajay Gupta's passport, a copy of the official recording showing that the aircraft ZSAOAK flew from Lanseria, South Africa to Bhubaneswar, India on the 22nd of July 2017 and arrived in India 23 July 2017. The aircraft returned on the 31st July 2017. 5. Also annexed is a screenshot from YouTube video taken on the 29th July in India at a religious festival. The claims made by Ms. Suzanne Daniels are clearly false, as quite obvious, Mr. Ajay Gupta could not have been in Melrose Arch, Johannesburg on the 29th July 2017. We wish to put it on record that Mrs. Suzanne Daniels was under oath when she incorrectly, intentionally made the malicious claims against our client, as set out in paragraph 3 above. In this regard, we have been instructed that we report such conduct to the relevant authorities, including the South African Police Service and the Speaker of Parliament. No invitation has been forthcoming from the inquiry for the production of information to clarify or refute the allegations. Mr. Gupta has refrained to date from public statements about the work of the inquiry or related matters concurrently before the courts. He has done so in defense to Parliament and the judiciary, and to prejudice of his name and reputation and that of his family members. He has no recourse in law to protect his name and reputation because the proceedings are protected by parliamentary privilege.
Now, some members took issue with the request, some even calling it a form of intimidation. But the committee eventually agreed that Ajay Gupta would be sent an invite to appear before the committee when it meets in January next year.
Families already been threatened, and we find this outrageous.
In a manner that is dictated by any individual in the world. On that one, he must forget. We will do our work according to our plan, as guided by the laws.
Now, we clearly took a decision, it's in the public domain, to invite the 3 Gupta brothers, Mr. Eric Wood and Mr. Salim Essa, to come to Parliament at a certain time to put their side, to answer the allegations against them. So it is not correct that no invitation has been forthcoming. They might not have received it in writing, but we've clearly given an indication that we will invite those implicated to come to Parliament.
I'm proposing that let's deal with this disruption in a particular way. When these letters come, you can take a note that certain letters have come, let them be responded. And if somebody wants to talk to us, there must be a way of talking, not through letters. Because if they want to talk to us, let's arrange, they must come and sit here and answer questions. There must be no people who've got privilege of talking to us through their letters that are disruptive.
Now, to discuss this very story, we're joined by Ahmed Gandhi, Gupta family lawyer. He'll be live on the telephone. In studio, we're joined by Lagite Kisho from Transform RSA. He's the deputy president. And we're also joined on OB by Oliver Dixon, who's a socio-political analyst. We're also joined by Mutsiri Tsiane, South African Liberty Foundation chairperson. Gentlemen, to all of you, welcome. Now, perhaps to start with you, Mr. Ahmed Gandhi. Now, what exactly prompted the letter by Mr. Ajay Gupta that was sent to Parliament? Because even on the clip, they've maintained that they did indicate that they would, at a later stage, perhaps call all those implicated.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening to the viewers as well.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you very much for having us. What what has happened is during the course of the parliamentary inquiry, there has been a substantial amount of evidence that has been led, right, which has implicated both Mr. Ajay Gupta as well as members of his family and further third parties, right, in wrongdoing, in nefarious dealings, and so forth. Now, there has been an indication in the media that Mr. Gupta and his family would be invited to come through to Parliament and give evidence. However, due to the length that this inquiry has gone on thus far, the family suffers further reputational damage, and as a result of which, it has a spin-off effect on their business, their livelihoods, their privacy, and so forth. Hence, we took the decision to prompt the parliamentary inquiry to furnish us with an invitation for us to come through to Parliament and provide answers to the allegations that have been put forward.
Now, take us through some of the requests in that letter, because I know you went on to say that if the Gupta brothers are to appear in Parliament, they'd like written questions perhaps 2 weeks in advance. Just take us through some of those requests.
Okay. Let's see. If you have to look at the evidence that has been placed, let's just take the Suzanne Daniels issue, where the allegation was made that they had met in the flat in Melrose, and it was raised by your colleague a couple of minutes ago. We have substantive and conclusive proof that Mr. Gupta was not in the country at the time. Now, our request to respond in writing to allegations that may be put forward is in order to adequately and properly prepare a reply. Instead of us going, or instead of Mr. Gupta going to the inquiry and not being prepared, alternatively, to save the time and the cost of the members of Parliament as well as the parliamentary inquiry to stretch for an exorbitant period of time, it is more prudent to obtain the written requests and the written questions from the parliamentary inquiry and respond, alternatively prepare to respond accordingly.
And then just on the side, are the Gupta brothers prepared for what could possibly come in Parliament? Because we all have seen those that have gone on to be witnesses there. It's very grueling. You spend quite a lot of time there. It's grueling and it can get emotional. So being somebody close to them, they're ready to go and at least clear their name.
Yes, undoubtedly. Undoubtedly, the family are more than prepared and more than happy to have their version heard. It goes in line with the democratic value of the right to a fair trial. It's unfair on them for these allegations to be made. It's made public, and they're far-reaching allegations. And Mr. Gupta and his brothers are adamant that they want to clear their name. And they are more than happy to come to Parliament and have their say.
Now, that forum in Parliament, those are parliamentarians, they're not legal practitioners at all. So you believe that at no point can this be a disadvantage to any of the brothers? Because we've all watched how Parliament, those proceedings have been, and maybe some legal experts can find them wanting here and there as parliamentarians. Nevertheless, they do have to hold the executive to account. But you feel that is the space, nevertheless, to be cross-examined by those that are not legal practitioners?
Well, Parliament has taken the initiative to examine and cross-examine witnesses in respect of this probe and this inquiry. It's only fair that Mr. Gupta and his brothers have the same opportunity. There might be disadvantage, there might be advantage. That's something that can only come out during questioning. But it is appropriate as the Parliament has instituted these inquiries.
Now, Mr. Takisho, your take on the inquiry itself, or perhaps the new developments of that letter and the reception thereof?
No, I think they have a right as people that have been mentioned in that inquiry to be able to inquire as to what is their status in relation to that. And I think there's nothing wrong with them having to write a letter and get assurance that indeed they will be able to be called, and they must also give their version. Remember, this is a constitutional issue as well, because they need to be given a chance to be able to respond to all of the allegations made against them. And that is only fair to comply with the Audi alter patram rule, to say if somebody speaks about you, you have to be given that opportunity to basically also respond to those allegations that has been made against you.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps just to rope in Mr. Mutsiritiane, your take on the parliamentary inquiry here. We're still having to grapple with the fact that as Parliament, they need to be holding to account the executive. We also have state entities that they must oversee. And now we're having private businesses or private individuals being brought before Parliament. Can you just take us through the legalities thereof?
You know, what we have here is nothing else but a so-called a court of public opinion. Legal or no legal implication matters not. Here is the question of somebody having to declare themselves, obviously, in a so-called public or a court of public opinion, where people just overall in general will have a smear campaign against another without even having to bring factual evidence. Whether it be real evidence, whether it be hard evidence, no form of evidence is being ever brought against. But among the most bizarre things about all this proceeding is that for the first time you have a private individual being brought into this allegation without evidence. But yet, South Africa has, over a period of time, have various business people who have had a takeover, or rather have captured South Africa in a true sense of the word. We can never underestimate or undermine the words that were taken or said by one of the CEOs there at Eskom, who said that more than 74, Brian Molefe indicated in particular, that more than 74% of the coal supply business is with Exxaro, is with Glencore, and yet none of the business people are being brought. Only this one. And we can't ignore the perception that for the past 5 years, every Sunday newspaper has been making allegations about the president, the Guptas, the president, the Guptas. The smear campaign has been ongoing for more than 5 years. Perhaps it's time that when they are called there, they will clear their names, as it should be. But it's nothing else but a court of public opinions. Mm-hmm. And as correctly said, it's time to just simply clarify this. And I hope once and for all, this matter will rest. But we would want to know who has captured South Africa. Indeed, it is not a mere 7%. Who has captured the 73% of Eskom? 73%. We want to know who, and they should themselves be brought to court. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily in this mere public opinion, but in a true sense of the word, so that they can account to South Africa and we know the truth. With the Gupta story, we all know that this is nothing. Just nothing out of this. But smear campaign for more than 5 years.
But then what about those politicians that go on to say we cannot discuss percentage of perhaps criminal activity, we've got to deal with criminal activity or allegations thereof, that we cannot say 7% who has captured the state more, that whatever, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, but nevertheless we cannot say a percentage, this is too menial an amount, it's negligible, we do not have to deal with it. What about those politicians that go to raise that argument, that we can't confine it to numbers or how big a crime?
Well, like one says, that this has always been a smear campaign from as far back as 5 years ago. And they want to make sure that South Africans are believing in that perception. Their purpose is not, they're not interested. Remember, these are not justice or legal persons. So their interest is never, that interest in the parliament is never about fairness, it's never about justice. It's about making sure that you smear the other party as much possible as it. What interest can the DA have about the ANC? It's as simple. What interest and protection and fairness can the EFF have against the ANC? Mm-hmm. We don't have any fairness. It's given. The DA will never like the ANC. The EFF has proven itself will never like the ANC. As long as they can make sure that you are able to put that this one is false, this one is corrupt, the more you can do that, perhaps you will win the vote. So it's not about fairness. Whatever is happening in there, it's not about justice, it's not about fairness, it's nothing else but to continue to pursue one simple thing, put a finger at those individuals, make sure that South Africa sees them, a court of public opinion. And they've been guilty from day one. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, they've been guilty. There's nothing they can clear. They'll only attempt to clear their names, but their name has been muddied for quite some time. The process in Parliament is not fair and it's not justice. You can never get justice in there.
Oliver,
you can
your
only
take?
get justice in our court. Yes.
Now, Oliver, your take there, the evidence that was provided today by the Mr. Gupta's lawyers today, and even a YouTube clip of him being somewhere else at a religious event in India.
No, look, evidence is important. A lot of speculations were being made about the Gupta's brother over time. And a lot of these speculations went untested because a lot of these speculations circulated in the court of public opinion. We're still waiting for a commission of inquiry into state capture that will test the veracity of the allegations made by newspaper, made by certain political parties. And the same commission of inquiry will have to test the veracity of the evidence presented by the Gupta side. And it's important that we have this come out. So it's important that they wrote this letter to Parliament stating certain points of, giving an evidentiary body, a portfolio of evidence, if you will, to, defend themselves. But I do think it would have been far more valuable if they were actually in Parliament being able to answer questions. It's a PR blunder on their part having chosen not to go to Parliament, because what it would have allowed them is a far better opportunity to respond to questions that are particularly pernicious, questions that have been time and time again raised in the media that is aimed at painting them in a negative light. So if it's truly the case that the Guptas are not corrupt, if it's truly the case that the Guptas have acquired their business with the government through fair means, then they should be able to have the answers to most of those questions, if not all of those questions. And I think they should be able to present it quite strongly in Parliament. The letter they wrote is quite important and a valuable letter, but I think a question-answer session, as would have been the case in Parliament, adds to that substance, and I think would have given us a clearer picture about what's going on. But importantly, and with regards to state capture, the issue with regards to state capture is not related to what percentage a business owns on, or what percentage of the revenue of the state is spent on certain businesses. That is certainly undoubtedly state capture. It's uncompetitive. So if the state is giving 80% of the budgetary spending to companies.
We seem to have lost Oliver Dixon there, but perhaps to you, Mr. Ghani. Oliver there is touching on a very pertinent point of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry. Do you believe that perhaps that forum would have been far better to ventilate some of these issues, or perhaps for the Gupta brothers to come and state their case?
I must apologize. I couldn't hear anything that Mr. Oliver had said.
He mentioned the judicial inquiry. He mentioned the judicial inquiry. Do you think that would be a better forum for such an investigation on state capture?
No, I don't think so, because Parliament is an overseen entity for state-owned enterprises. If the allegation or the inquiry relates to state-owned enterprises, then parliamentary inquiry is the correct forum for a fact-finding mission. I don't see why a judicial inquiry would be necessary unless there are certain allegations or certain charges that are actually put to Mr. Gupta and his family.
Now, he goes on to say that it was perhaps a PR blunder on your part not to perhaps request to be part of the processes in Parliament very, very earlier on. If you're talking about damage to the business, damage to the person, why not a bit earlier?
We would be, it didn't make sense for our client to prompt an earlier invitation. Throughout this period of time, wherein Mr. Gupta and the Gupta-owned entities and Gupta leagues have come to the fore, the Guptas have kept a very reserved stance on it. For the simple reason is that they believe in their innocence. Right? They did not want to come to the inquiry at an earlier stage because in their mind they felt there's no reason for it. No, nothing untoward would be found out. However, subsequent to reading the transcriptions of what has happened over a period of time, there were many allegations. And our client's view is that these are contrived allegations made against them. Hence, it became appropriate and it became important for our office to intervene and request an invitation to answer to the various allegations that have taken place.
Now, you do state that it is various allegations, so it's across the board, even before that inquiry itself. So many would still ask this million-dollar question. Why would everybody be lying?
Well, it's clearly not everybody that's lying. It is the media that are painting a particular picture about the Guptas. I ask you, if we take the Gupta leaks, which is some 10,000 emails, which purport to implicate the Guptas in wrongdoing, right, throughout state-owned enterprises. Yet there hasn't been any charge, any prosecution, or any lawsuit for that matter. Now, it begs the question as to the veracity of the Gupta leaks, or the so-called Gupta leaks. Again, the Susan Daniels matter, that is another example of a lack of veracity. So I can't point fingers and say that a particular party or a particular person has an agenda. Right? We're not in a position to say if there's an agenda, what the agenda is. But what we can clearly and unequivocally state is that a lot and majority of the evidence that has been brought to the fore is contrived. And the Guptas, the Gupta family, the Gupta-related companies all have a right to reply to the allegations made against them, be it in any forum, irrespective of whether it's the parliamentary forum or the judicial inquiry or court of law. The fact of the matter remains that any person, even if it's not the Guptas, any human being living in South Africa has the right to reply to allegations put against him.
Mr. Tekisho?
It's as simple as that.
Yes. Now, Mr. Tekisho, these allegations have been around for a while now, but we're not seeing any finality, perhaps where the court becomes that final arbiter. Why is that? We're still talking, it's either one report after the other, but what most citizens would be looking to have would be court proceedings where we watch, and if they're guilty, they're found guilty, and we close the matter, and whatever is meted against the family, if indeed they are guilty, or if they're found innocent, so be it. But why are we not seeing finality in this matter?
But that's exactly the point that has been made already, that we think that there are ulterior motives in relation to coming up with this parliamentary inquiry. And I'm saying that for the following reasons. That firstly, when you had this information, there are various statutory bodies that can be dealing with these issues. Firstly, you can be able to give this to the police, you can give it to the Hawks. They are better placed to investigate this matter, even better than the parliamentary inquiry. Because anyway, this is not a court of law, it's just a court of public opinion as put by other people. And those guys can be able to take this matter to the NPA, and the NPA can take it to the court. And we will know...
Talk to me about why you refer it, though, to a court of public opinion.
Now, obviously, this thing is public, and a number of people see exactly what has happened and what was the role of the family. And besides, this inquiry is really an inquisitorial inquiry, which does not really give people a lot of chance to be able to respond at the same time. It has an evidence leader, and it has parliamentarians who are not lawyers, who can ask whatever questions that are not sometimes making legal sense, but because they are privileged in terms of the Act, they can ask whatever they want to ask.
But then they're going to refer us to the inquiry on the SABC to say, there we saw results, so in this respect they need to be afforded the space to do the very same thing that committee did.
Yeah, but I'm saying when they finish with their work, they'll have to go to Parliament, and they'll have to put this report, let me call it a conclusion, or whatever, recommendations to Parliament. Parliament must then engage this report, and then Parliament must take a decision on that. But I'm saying it's better than having to give this to the police. And there's, besides, a commission of inquiry that has been mentioned that will deal with these matters anyway.
But the ANC attempted something as well. They went on to try and investigate state capture, if you remember earlier on.
Yes.
That wasn't really criticized at the time, because they also attempted, if we're going to talk about perhaps having the relevant law enforcement agencies deal with the matter, they attempted, as a party that is governing the country. They attempted. Shouldn't somebody have told them, but you actually do not have the jurisdiction to be subpoenaing people and all of these things, but they went on to attempt to investigate.
No, but they were doing it politically, because some of their members were mentioned in all of these allegations that we made, and we would not know what decision would have been taken politically. Now we're talking about people alleging that crimes have been committed, and there are structures that are there to deal with these allegations, to deal with the issues of crime. And why can't we be able to trust those structures and give them these allegations for them, because they are better placed and capacitated to deal with these issues, such that we should be able to know what the truth is. Because these are just allegations that have been made by a number of witnesses, and the problem is they cannot be able to, those witnesses cannot be able to be engaged at the same time and cross questions and all of that. So you will have to wait for your turn, and at that time your name has already been muddied, and after 3 weeks is then that we come and be able to deal with the issues that they have mentioned. So it's not really fair in that way.
No, there's certainly been some fireworks there in Parliament. We will all be awaiting the 16th of January, not really something that has been now put as the final conclusion that they will be coming on the 16th of January, but we'll all be awaiting their appearance there. Thank you, gentlemen.